He hadn't touched a woman in 12 long years. And the first one fate dropped into his arms looked half destroyed. Samuel Granger didn't ask much of life anymore. He kept to himself up in the dry New Mexico hills, where only the wind and the ghosts of his past kept him company. A weathered cabin, an old shotgun, and memories heavier than stone. That was his whole world. But everything shifted the day she appeared. She staggered out from the tree line like the devil himself was chasing her. Barefoot, filthy, a ragged strip of white cloth clinging to her frame that might once have been a dress. Her arms were torn up, her lips cracked, and her eyes, they carried horrors no one should ever witness. She collapsed in front of him, whispering only two fragile words as she clutched that cloth to her chest. "Please don't." Samuel froze. She wasn't bleeding badly, but she shook as though she'd crawled through fire itself. He stepped closer. She flinched, but didn't pull back. That's when the cloth shifted, and what he saw hollowed him out. Her back bore the marks of torment, burns, welts, deep scars twisted into symbols and letters, like someone had branded cruelty straight into her flesh. Samuel staggered back. It wasn't the wounds that rattled him most. It was the way she folded into herself, as though trying to vanish. And suddenly, Tennessee came rushing back. The war. The young woman he hadn't saved. The one with the same shattered gaze. He'd walked away once before. He swore he wouldn't again. Quiet and deliberate. He draped his coat over her shoulders like a vow. No words. Just action. Then he lifted her into his arms and carried her toward the cabin. For the first time in years, Samuel felt something stirring inside him. Life. The cabin was warm, though the mountain night still carried a bite. She lay curled on the cot, clutching his coat as though it were sewn from safety itself. Samuel didn't press her with questions. He wouldn't have known where to start even if he tried. Instead, he built a fire in the stove. Not for heat, but for the steady crackle that made the place feel alive. Her eyes roamed the room, wide and restless, as if expecting danger to break through the door any second. Even the whisper of wind against the shutters made her flinch. Samuel poured bitter coffee, the kind older than he liked to admit, just to give his hands a purpose. He sat at the table, watching the flames and stealing quiet glances her way. The way she gripped that coat told him she hadn't given up completely. Later, she stirred and turned her head. For just a breath, her eyes met his. No words, no tears, only a glimmer of something human buried beneath the pain. He gave a small nod, the kind of nod a soldier gives when silence is the only language that matters. She turned away again, but the moment lingered. At dawn, her voice finally broke the stillness. "Water." He passed her a cup carefully, no sudden moves. She drank slow, then studied him longer than before. That look didn't beg for rescue, didn't offer thanks. It said only one thing: "I'm still here." What Samuel didn't yet know was that one word, one sip of water, had already set the wheels of something unstoppable in motion. She said little that day. Short answers, nods, cautious glances, like she was still deciding if he was real or another cruel trick. By late afternoon, Samuel was on the porch, whittling down a busted chair leg, when she came out and sat quietly beside him. At first, she just stared at the trees. Then, almost as though speaking to herself, she murmured, "They made me scrub their boots." He kept carving, didn't flinch, just nodded. She went on. Her name was Clara Reeves. She spoke of a mining camp hidden in the hills. Not on any map. A place where men were worked till they broke, punished when they tried to resist. She tried to run twice. The first time, they broke her nose. The second, they carved her back like rawhide. Samuel didn't ask how she'd managed to escape the third time. Some stories are meant to be told only when a soul is stronger. But just as the sun dropped low behind the pines, Samuel heard hoofbeats thundering fast up the ridge road. He rose, shotgun in hand, motioned Clara inside. She obeyed with the speed of someone who'd lived this fear before. The rider who appeared didn't look like a ranch hand. He looked like a banker too fond of whiskey, greasy mustache curling over a cruel smile. He called out her name. "Clara Reeves. You've got one chance to come quiet." Samuel stepped down from the porch. "She's not going anywhere." The man sneered. Ain't up to you, old-timer. Samuel cocked the shotgun. Didn't aim, just let the sound hang heavy. Out here, that was warning enough. The stranger didn't draw. He spat into the dirt, turned his horse, and rode off. But the look in his eyes made one thing certain. He'd return. And he wouldn't be alone. Samuel sat on the porch long after the rider vanished, shotgun laid across his lap, eyes locked on the dark tree line. Later that night, he scribbled a note to an old friend who wore a badge, just in case. 3 days passed. Quiet days, but not peaceful. The kind of silence that feels like the land itself is waiting for trouble. Samuel barely left Clara's side. He didn't check traps or chop wood. He only cleaned that shotgun over and over, like a man preparing for judgment. Late one afternoon, the stillness broke. No birds, no insects, only the rising dust of riders on the ridge road. 3 of them, not ranchers, not lawmen. They rode with the confidence of men who didn't need permission. Samuel stood framed in the doorway, Clara behind him, holding her breath. One of the riders was the same man from before. This time, his voice was sharp with command. "Step aside, old man." Samuel didn't move. The second rider shifted, hand drifting toward his belt. Samuel fired before it cleared leather. The man tumbled off his horse, blood soaking his leg. The others froze, not daring to advance. Then a new voice cut through the tension. Calm, measured, hard as worn leather. "I'd think real careful about your next move." From the trees stepped a man with a badge on his chest and a rifle slung easy in his hands. Abram Harlow, Samuel's old war comrade, now sheriff of the territory. "This here's my ground," Abram said, "and she's under my protection now." The wounded rider groaned. His companions cursed, but didn't test the sheriff. They rode off slow, but with hate in their eyes. Afterward, Samuel asked Abram how he'd known to come. Abram smirked. "You send me a note that smells of powder and regret. I figure it's worth the ride." The dust settled. The cabin stood quiet again, but not with the same heavy silence as before. Clara no longer shrank into shadows. She still startled at sudden sounds, still woke sweating from dreams, but she began to join Samuel in small ways. She sat at the table in the mornings, sipping bitter coffee. She helped carry wood. She asked questions about the stove. Little things. But little things carry weight when you're clawing your way back from the edge. Samuel noticed the way she lingered by the window, letting the daylight touch her face. The way she laughed once, just a breath, but enough to stir something in him. He wasn't sure if he was repairing her, or she was repairing him. Maybe it didn't matter. One evening she brought in a bundle of wildflowers and set them by the window. Samuel said nothing, but the next day he swept the porch clean for the first time in years. They never spoke of love. They never named it. But over stew and coffee one night, Clara looked up and asked, "You think maybe some people aren't sent to save others, just to give them space to save themselves?" Samuel didn't answer, just nodded. Words might have broken the spell. And so it went. 2 souls in a cabin, healing slowly, without fanfare, without permission. But here's the truth. How many Claras are still out there, running from nightmares? How many Samuels sit alone, convinced their story is already over? Sometimes all it takes is one choice, one act of kindness, one moment of not walking away. So let me ask you, who are you in this story? The one fleeing, or the one who opens the door? If this tale touched something in you, give it a like. Share it. Let it stay with you. And if you want more stories, raw ones, real ones, the kind that linger, subscribe. Because out here in the West, stories don't end. They just keep writing.